How's it going, YouTube? Coming in today with another video, and today, guys, what to bring to you is the Tri-Brigade video that we've all been waiting for. I've been getting a lot of questions about this, but I'm here today with Sir Emanon. Feel free to introduce yourself and just talk about what you do here on YouTube.
Yeah, hey guys, it's Sir Emanon here. I do a lot of competitively oriented content, much like yourself. But I tend to go into like super micro interactions of specific decks. Right now, I'm actually doing an in-depth series on like Cashier, for instance. But yeah, I did a video about a year ago on like a really super long in-depth combo tutorial on Tri-Brigade Lyrilusc, which is why we're back here today. So thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I gotta just always go back to one of the OGs of the deck and really make sure that we all know what we're getting ourselves into if we play this deck this format, because the format's definitely an interesting one. Again, like we were just talking about, 20 decks versus one deck, or even like talking about flu in the equation too, and just really where does Lyri Tri and other Tri just variants fall into the format. So I do hope that everyone's excited for this video today, because there's gonna be quite a bit to talk about. And if you haven't already checked out the sponsors of the channel over at Imperium Duelist, a Dragon Shield, or a gem, definitely go ahead and do so. And once we hit 16,000 subscribers, I'll be giving away the Player's Choice Spellground. So definitely go ahead and smash that sub button. And I'll link Sir Emanon's channel down in the description below. So definitely go ahead and make sure that you check him out as well. And without further ado, let's hop right on into the video. So the first thing that I want to talk about is going to be Revolt. Now, Revolt is definitely one of the craziest cards we've seen back when Tri-Brigade was first starting off. This card was really nuts, especially if they had Appaloosa with this. That meant the Bell didn't really accomplish what it usually does against this card. Definitely one of the cards that gets you a lot of follow-up. Being able to reborn that Nerval alone is really solid. Then also just being able to summon out Omen, which is the non-targeting banish. But is Revolt needed now? Is it still enough?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the Lyrilusc variant, I actually do think Revolt is one of the more potent parts of the end board. Just because since we lost the Simorg link, you don't really have access to follow up in that department. Because like one of the best things you could do is, especially in like weaker hands or where you got hand trapped or things like that, you can just end on like a Simorg and then just summon out Cobalt Sparrow during their end phase and you'd be fine. Also, I think right now with current Lyrilusc Tri-Brigade variations, you're not going to see as much emphasis on things like Ensemble Robin, especially with like Barrow Canary, because there's always been like a mutually exclusive conflict between the Canary plays and Bear Broom, because you can't resolve both in the same turn, just due to the way the restrictions line up. So I think that picking between one or the other sort of depends on like what you value more in terms of what the follow-up is and what the interruptions are. And as you mentioned, I think the interruption aspect of Revolt as well as the follow-up is too good to pass up on right now. So I do think that Revolt, like as just a searchable tool to go for on your first turn, is I would err on the side of like needing it. I know some people are still on the fence about it, but I do think it's one of the more powerful portions of the end board for sure.
Yeah, and I know that there's been a lot of 50-50 going on of, do you play Revolt, do you not play Revolt? I think the only thing that you really got to keep in mind if you are going to commit to playing Revolt is that you want your monsters to be banished already before you flip Revolt, so you don't lose to Keldo Mudora, because again, if you flip this and all your monsters get returned to deck, it's going to be a really rough time. But if they're already banished, being able to summon them back so you can't get them shuffled back is always going to be a really smart play around.
Yeah, the nice thing is, of course, that like Revolt doesn't target anything, so you don't lose out to Keldo Medora too hard as long as you have like the setup for you, as you mentioned. And also, the nice thing about Tri-Brigade in general right now is that it doesn't lose to Bestials, which pretty much every tier player is meaning like some number between like 7 to 9 of them. So I think that having just a natural way to bypass that is nice. So yeah, I really am a fan of Revolt. I do think it's again like super powerful. And you want to end the game quickly. Like you don't want to give tier any more like leg room than they need. And any way to just end the game as fast as possible is nice.
Yeah, definitely being able to use Revolt, Summon Omen, and Banish Kit immediately is also going to be really good. This card overall, just again, for follow-up reasons alone, really smart card to play, even at just one. I know before it was always like 2 or 3, but now it's definitely just that one of, but it's still really nice because, again, a lot of the duels right now, they don't really go on too long, and you don't really want them to. So this is definitely going to be a smart one to play here.
Yeah, for sure.
So, talking a bit more about different variants of Tri versus Leary Tri, Tri Sprite. I know this is another one that's gotten really popular, and this is something that's also really cool just because of the synergy of all the level 2s. You have things like Sprint to go ahead and dump the kit to dump in Revolt if you need another search. Then you have the support of the Sprite engine with things like Double Cross and Smashers. Do you think that it's worth it to run like Leary Tri over Tri Sprite, or do you think that they're just two completely separate decks that do different things?
Yeah, I think it's actually interesting because, like, naturally there are some comparisons to make there, just because of the usage of the Tri engine. But I think both decks kind of facilitate different game plans. Um, I actually did try to incorporate like a small sprite package into the Lyrilusc package, but it didn't really like the Lyrilusc cards don't really facilitate sprite all too well. Whereas the Tri-Brigade cards do naturally, just because of the existence of like the Scareclaw Link one and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that like Tri-Spray is kind of just a different deck. It's kind of in a different camp than Lyrilusc Tri-Brigade. And admittedly, I haven't focused or like practiced, or rather tested too much with Tri-Brigade Spray, just in general. But I do think that it's still a really, really cool variant. One of the powerful things about it is that you can actually still play like the Bestials, because one of the weaknesses of the Lyrilusc variant is that using the Bestials on your opponent's first turn makes it so that it's harder to use like your Lyrilusc engine, especially like Warbler, which is one of the key enablers of the package. So yeah, the sprite variant is definitely really cool. I do think that there's like a lot of potential to kind of explore stuff still. I think it's there's a lot of decks in the format right now that I think are kind of under explored. Things like, you know, Bestial Brander, for example, come to mind. But Tri-Brigade Sprite's another one of them, one of those decks, and I think that especially with like the existence of Sprint now, and the fact that like Beaver kind of like is a nice bridge as well with both of those engines, you know, being a beast to be able to like banish off Tri-Brigades and stuff.
It's so
There's some
crazy.
cool synergy. Yeah, there's like cool synergy there. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of room to definitely play around with these different variants. It's just that like, you know, in terms of what got unhit on the ban list being Rosetta Starling to 2, my immediate focus kind of went to the Lyrilusc stuff, of course.
So I actually have another question about that. Then bringing up the ban list,
Yeah.
we'll talk about the list here in a little while. But so we used to see a lot of people running the one barrage and one zoo monster, and then especially when we had three of the Tenkies as well, we still saw the one zoo monster. Do you think that it's still smart to run one zoo monster to be able to go Borbo and do a big Zeus play?
I think that this maybe isn't the format for it, just because Zeus into tier boards isn't the greatest. Like the mirror is a bit different because you can dweller into Zeus, which is, you know, much more impactful. But I think if the way to clear boards is to just try and hand trap your opponent, I think if you're not playing, if you're not like playing the mirror specifically, like, even if you are playing the mirror, you're trying to like hand trap them to do bestials and stuff. So I think it's like easier to try and prevent their board and to be able to like break it through other parts of your engine, things like DDL or Omen and things like that. I think that is probably going to be a more reliable strategy than trying to go into Zeus, just because it's also like preserves your normal summon for like your Tri-Brigade plays as well. Like instead of having to expend it on a Zoo play or like use Farragut to like summon it out, like you can utilize other parts of your engine to help try and break the board after like you hand trap them. And I think that one of the biggest historical strengths of Tri-Brigade is just that it has a lot of room for hand traps. So that definitely is a consideration.
Yeah, Tri-Brigade's always been one of those decks that just come out of nowhere, and it really did take over the format for a little while. This deck was absolutely insane, and it didn't even feel like it did a lot, but it still did, just in its own engine, the amount of hand traps that it played, and even looking at a card like Bell right now, the availability of just being able to play Bell because you have the room. If you like Bell Kit Effect, is kind of nuts as well. So
Yeah.
there's so many different opportunities with so many hand traps to just go ahead and shut down a board. Kit is just like such a hand trappable spot, especially with cards like Valor or Imperm. Is another card that is just like is so nuts because like at that point you got to like make a new kit or like pop your own, and being able to play a deck like this, I think that it'll catch a lot of people off guard.
Yeah, definitely.
So talking about the other variant that I wanted to bring up here is going to be Scareclaw. Scareclaw Tri is definitely going to be an interesting one that I've heard quite a bit about. What are your thoughts on this one though?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't run into this variant or theorized it a whole ton, but it definitely has like cool potential. Just the existence of Lightheart makes things very interesting. We already brought that up with kind of the sprite build, just being an enabler for things like Elf or just any Link 2 being like Farragut and stuff. But yeah, the Scareclaw cards are also really cool. We saw them also splash into tier, obviously before like the issues and stuff came out. So I think that the engine has a lot of room for experimentation for sure. If you want to like even like expand on the Scareclaw package and play like Risa Starfrost just to enable like other like maybe even synchro plays, for instance. Like we saw like Baron being splashed in for that reason, like in tier, for instance, and you could make a similar argument for that in like tri-variants. So again, I haven't done a whole lot of testing myself with it, but definitely it is something to think about if you're looking to play like any version of Tri-Brigade. It's worth exploring like all the different options.
It's actually really funny too, because with Vasas, it's a level 6 tuner. And I was like, what if we just summoned
Yeah, yeah.
Garura next to it and made Ultimaya?
Yeah, you can do like a lot of cool stuff with it for sure.
Yeah, so Scareclaw, definitely an interesting one. I think it's another one that's just like not very looked into yet. So
Mhm.
definitely a lot more to see in the future out of Scareclaw. Maybe some more support later on down the road, hopefully. I think that it has really good potential as an engine. As a deck alone, I don't really think that it's that crazy. But
Right.
definitely paired with tier or try, it definitely has a lot of potential in the format.
Yeah, like the efficiency of like Rykar into like Arrival and stuff. Like we saw like Triff play around with like the list quite a lot, extensively, like around like Dabble format. So yeah, I definitely think that there's room to kind of like move that engine and try and test it in other decks as well.
So today you have 2 replays for us to show exactly like what the deck can accomplish right now.
Yep.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and check those out. So here are the replays. These are actually really cool just to be able to see exactly what the deck can do and all the little combo intricacies. And so this is actually really important. And who's a better teacher than Sir Emanon? So I'm going to pass on over to you if you want to explain what's going on here.
Yeah, so this is one of the more interesting combos. A lot of people know like Warbler Sparrow, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think it's important to understand like what the deck can accomplish if you don't open the most like obvious Lyrilusc starter. But there's always cool ways to get into the Lyrilusc package through the Tri-Brigades or vice versa, and I think this combo shows it off pretty well. So this one is a Fractal plus Sparrow combo with like a couple blanks to discard off Bear Room to get maximum value. I think this is like a cool way to kind of show off like the kind of full ceiling of what the deck can do, even if you don't open like what's intuitively the most optimal hand. Yeah, this one starts off pretty simply with Fractal into Nerval. When you can get a search here for the kit. This one is the most obvious one to grab just in case you get hand trapped. You still have somewhat to follow up, but you're going to banish 2 for your Farragut here. And then right here, you're going to use the effect to summon out the Cobalt from your hand, which is going to grab you a Sapphire Swallow. And you can run through all your names pretty fast, which is nice. So you can link these 2 away into Bear Broom, and I make a note just in just a sec where you can use Farragut to draw if you want. But here you're gonna pitch 2 for the Bear Broom to go ahead and summon back the banished Nerval, which is nice because not only can we use its effect here to banish 2 for your DDL, but you can also use it as Exceed material since it, of course, is level 1. So you get added access to your Lyrilusc engine here. So you can go ahead and use your Recital for your Wagtail. And this gets you even more bodies because your Wagtail, of course, is going to get you your Bird Call once you summon it off your Sapphire Swallow here. And then you can overlay into the newly semi-limited Recital Starling number 2, which will get you a Warbler. And then you can go ahead and overlay for your Draco Future. And then you haven't actually used your Bird Call yet, so you can go ahead and grab any name. And they can summon the Warbler off the second effect of the Bird Call, and then bring back a name. And that's going to go ahead and result in an Appaloosa for 3 materials, and you can net a search for Revolt off the Bear Broom as well. So even though that hand might have seemed a bit awkward, kind of like to the maybe like newer players of the deck, this ends on a very, very powerful end board where you have all of your follow-up you need through Revolt, plus an interruption with a non-targeting banish, 3 negations off Appaloosa, a bounce to protect your board with DDL, and then just a generic monster negation off of UDF as well.
So with that combo line, if you know for a fact that you're playing against tier, do you ever try to go ahead games 2 and 3 and just search Crow? Or do you still just try to go for the same extension, same end board?
Yeah, you can definitely search Crow in certain parts of this board. Like you can search it off like one of those Cyto Starlings. Like you don't have to go for the UDF line, for example. Like you might choose to simply just end on like an Appaloosa plus DDL. Alternatively, though, you could argue that you could just expend one of your, or you can expend your Draco Future negation on a tier name engrave and it accomplishes similar things. It sort of depends on what you expect your opponent to side. If you want like to diversify like where your interruptions are, if you want as hand trap specifically, there's definitely a case for that. But yeah, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can search and what you can end on, which is the nice part about this deck.
Yeah, I know once we get Kashtira format, it's going to be really popular to see the Dark Rulers. Right now, it's realistically just Droplet and main and sides. But even against Fluanderies, it's probably the only deck that you're going to see the Dark Ruler. So it just depends, like Emanon was saying as well, as to what you think that your opponent's going to side. Because if you want the safer board to just have cards in hand as well, like Crows, then that's good. But if you think that your board's safe, then you can just go for the full combo as well. Because again, this is a pretty insane board. Also, the Draco Future being able to snatch steal is also really nice as well. So definitely a few things here that are really insane to go up against. And then you also just had those two cards as blanks as well. So potentially it could have even been more cards that would just help you through your combo. You could have opened very differently. So just off of the cards we had in this alone, this is definitely a solid end board.
Yeah. And then the second combo here is going to be like a more standard combo. This is like the classic Warbler Sparrow combo. It could be Warbler Fractal as you see. And now Tenki's at 3, so like this is really consistent. You have like 6 ways into Fractal, and you have Bird Call as well to get into Sparrow. So lots of different options. So here we're just going to open Fractal for the sake of example. So we're going to use it to send Sparrow and then summon out Warbler to bring it back. And then here we can get our Sapphire Swallow, and then we can go into the standard stuff, being Recital Starling. Here I search Wagtail. I know some people are cutting the Wagtail just because it's not necessary, but here it's nice to just get the extra bonus card as a resource. We're going to grab Nerval off the second recital and then go for our Draco Future line. And then we haven't normaled yet, so we can actually go ahead and normal summon out Nerval. Here you can also, I make a note in chat by the way, if we stop here for a second, you can opt for Farragut instead of Draco Future, depending on what your extra deck looks like or what you want to go for. Because you can end on double Dragon Lords, depending on like how you want to play out this combo, which is one of the best ways to protect Heralded Arclight, which is what we're going to go for in this play. And the advantage to doing Draco Future, if you do decide to play it, is even though the combo is generally resilient to Bestials, there is one choke point, being the Fabled Cerebral, because it is a light monster. So in order to like insulate yourself against that, having the Draco Future here is nice. But yeah, in this case though, we're just gonna normal summon the Nerval. We banished 4 there for the Shurig, the Ominous Omen, and then we're gonna link summon into our Farragut, and then we're gonna trigger both of our searches here. So we're gonna grab a Fabled Cerebral off of the Omen, and then we're gonna grab Caress off of the Nerval. Then we're gonna Caress here to pitch the Cerebral, and then the Fabled Cerebral brings itself back because it was discarded. And then we can use the Caress to banish Chu for the Bear Broom. And if you want to commit 2 cards, you definitely can do so here, which is how we can get the DDL on board. So we can just pitch 2 and bring back one of our unused Tri-Brigades. You can also just special it off Farragut if you have an extra one that you opened. And then we can Synchro Summon into the Herald of the Arclight, and then we can banish 2 off the Fractal here for the DDL. And then we can finally link away all of our extraneous materials into our Appaloosa. So we can trigger everything in Grave, grabbing Revolt, and then drawing 1, putting 1 back, and that's our end board. So this is very strong against Tier, also incidentally good against Droplet, people are citing that. And you have 2 ways to protect it between Revolt and Double Dragon Lord, so it's not as easy as just summon a monster, go into battle phase, and attack over, which is nice. And then to back it up, you have Appaloosa and DDL to kind of stop their other plays as well.
Herald is such a crazy card.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, that card is like super, super strong. Obviously, they're not going to be able to do much in the milling department if they are floodgated, which is nice.
Yeah, it's always really funny to see Herald too, because even thinking back to like when we had BN that was like really popular, and then you couldn't like run it over, which was always really nuts. Even Herald alone, just for like the searches that it used to do off of like multiple decks. But just to see it still meta relevant is still really cool. Again, being able to protect it from being ran over, always really nice too. This is just something that makes it real hard to play, especially if you are on tier. Because even if you go into something like a Baguska, like you still have the Revolt, you have the Double Dragon Lord, so just not your normal answer is being able to answer these plays too. So I definitely like to see that here. Again, the Herald is only from deck or hand to grave. Shen Shen is from field. So there is some leniency with like what you can get to grave, but at the same point, it still makes it very annoying to try and play the game.
Yeah, and even if you're against a deck like Sprite, for instance, where Herald maybe isn't as strong against, in terms of like its floodgate effect, you can actually do pretty well against Sprite here because you can use DDL on like the normal, for instance, and then you can like Revolt once they use like starter, so you can just like keep taking the bodies off the board to deny them from getting extra extenders on field, which is great. So yeah, this board has a lot of versatility into a lot of different matchups, which is also a really strong aspect of it.
This end board kind of nasty, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, this is a really, really good end board in my opinion.
Well, let's go check out the deck as well.
Yeah.
All right, and we're back with the deck profile here. Definitely some cool replays, some really crazy end boards. This is what we're looking at though in terms of what the list is. You can see a ton of hand traps is here as well, as we were talking about earlier. Hand traps are just one of the things that if you can run a ton of them and your combo just takes maybe 1 or 2 cards, it's really crazy because you can shut your opponent down with like 3 to 4 hand traps and just go absolutely full combo behind it. So definitely a cool list so far. If you want to have some words as far as like what kind of choices you made here and why you made them.
Yeah, sure. So we already touched on like the huge hand trap count or like the non-engine slots. These can obviously be tailored to whatever your expected metagame is. I think that Bell is really, really good in particular to highlight, just because in certain strategies, you really want to be able to have some insulation against Keldeo and Medora specifically. This is one of them where like if you go second, it can be a little bit hard to push through boards if all your resources get shuffled in before you have a chance to use Tri-Brigades to banish them. So it's nice to be able to stop them there. Also, it's just good as a defensive, or rather an offensive mechanism to be able to, stop their plays if you want to play more aggressively. But yeah, the hand trap lineup is really, really nice here. One thing you could actually consider, which I thought about, is actually cutting the Barrel Canary entirely, which sounds kind of strange. But you can maybe make this more like focused on the Tri-Brigade portion, because as you can see, I'm not actually playing the Ensemble Robin in terms of like the extra deck. It's in the side deck as like the side deck is just simply a list of options, since this definitely is still a work in progress. But that being said, again, I kind of mentioned before the conflict between Barrel Canary and the Bear Broom. So you definitely don't want to be running into that too much. It still is nice to have Barrel as like a way to facilitate Zeus plays going second, for example. But definitely is not as integral as it was before when we would be more focused on similar lines specifically. So that is something to think about. In the similar vein, you can maybe even consider dropping like 1-for-1 if you want to play like more Tri-Brigades or even more hand traps. More hand traps is always nice. But yeah, I think for the most part, the list is pretty solid. I think like you're maxing out on all the best starters, and you're just playing one of the searchable things. And we're not really playing too much for a grind game, even though this can come up. A lot of the times you are just trying to drown out your opponent in hand traps if you're going second, and if you're going first, you want to set up the best board that you can. So we're really just trying to facilitate that in this list. And then the extra deck, I think, is actually pretty tight right now, especially with the introduction of Herald of the Arclight, as you saw in the second replay there. But interestingly enough, I think one of the more cuttable things is the Draco Future package, which might sound a bit strange as well to hear. But you find that if you do get stopped in your combo, like if you're playing against like other decks, like other hand trap heavy decks, maybe like Sprite, for example, that you more so like focus on going into the Tri-Brigade lines. So there is a case to be made to try and play other cards that end the game quickly. Things like Access Code come to mind with Rugal, as you see there. But yeah, other options in the side deck, which I think are things that are pretty common, but I just didn't incorporate them into the mainer side deck here, or extra deck here rather.
So with one of the things on the sideboard being the Feather Storm, just such an oppressive card. Have you ever thought about running the Harpy Conductor too, just so you can activate it from hand? Just I know people were doing that before.
Yeah, that was definitely something that would come up in the past. Right now, I think it's kind of hard to utilize Harpy Conductor in a super beneficial way because like it was a nice link to just bridge into like the Simorg link. Either in weak hands or hands where you did want to use that play where you just Harpy's Feather Storm on your own turn to like shut off hand traps and stuff.
No.
Because like all you're doing right now in that case is like converting it into maybe like a Shurei going second or like a Farage going first maybe. So it's like one of the things where it'd be a nice luxury to have, but the space is like super tight where it's really hard to kind of find room for it. But it definitely is a play to consider for sure if you want to utilize Feather Storm in maybe an unexpected way that people haven't seen in like over a year now.
Yeah, I think that another thing too is if I were to cut like the Draco Future engine, it'd probably honestly just be Doom Eagle as one of the top cards in my head. That
Yeah.
card's really crazy too.
Yeah, like usually like Doom Eagle access code is over there in the side deck as well. Just because like Doom Eagle is nice as an additional like interruption, especially against like tier and stuff. So that card's quite strong as well.
Yeah, and like you were saying too, with the hand trap lineup being so tailored to like how the format is, I know one of the cards that I'd probably swap out just by looking at like what the format's turning into now and like what I've seen is potentially Ash for even like Nibiru. I know that a lot of people are really 50-50 on that too, but we've actually been seeing a lot of lists that are doing really well actually playing Nibiru. Which is interesting because there's a lot of different times where your opponents are extending so hard in tier before they can make Rukalas, where if you're able to like get rid of the board, especially it's really common in the mirror match, or like if you care about Dweller, which I mean Dweller is still Dweller. So being able to just Nibiru the board before the end phase, because once it passes over that they have Crime Dweller, you just can't really do anything because the second you try to respawn, they just crime. So it's definitely an interesting choice, but it's just a means to be able to out cards like Dweller.
Yeah, I actually do agree with you in terms of like Nibiru being better than a lot of people give it credit for. Just because it's one of those paradoxical things that comes up in almost every format where it comes up, where there's people who like over respect Nibiru, so like they'll make sure that their play is insulated from it, and then people end up dropping Nibiru for that reason, and then people start disrespecting it, and then they just play super hard into it, and then it becomes pretty good again because it's unexpected, right? So. Yeah, definitely there's a case to be made there. Veiler's another option for sure. Just because, as we talked about before, Veiler Imperm Callus is like really, really as strong as a choke point. Also as good against like Flu, for example. So yeah, there's like a lot of different options for the non-engine slots that you can definitely play. Crow obviously is like the more notable one because it's super searchable in this deck through like a lot of the engine pieces. And is also very great against tier, but I think the rest of the cards you can definitely play around with. Tailor them to your specific metagame or to your liking.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially if you're looking at your sideboard in general, probably a little bit heavier on the Bistrills too. Just to make
Yeah.
sure that you have those because Bistrills are insane. They're just really strong. But as we were talking about before too, with the Warbler, it's really hard to really want to play both of them at the same time because having the body on board really nice, not being able to use Warbler not so nice. So
Yeah.
it kind of is what it is. It's double-edged sword.
Yeah, and that's actually another thing too. One of the options you see in the side as like just a potential idea is the Wind Channeler, or the Wind Charmer rather, because when people were playing Nibiru when this deck was super popular, that came up as like a tech to be able to just normal summon like a Lyrilusc name, for example, link up into the Wind Charmer and then crash it, and then you can search Warbler and then play main phase two. So definitely something you can do similar to that in terms of like with the Bestials. So that's a way to make that a bit more advantageous than just shutting yourself off of that play, because obviously we all know how strong Bestials are. So trying to incorporate them definitely is very reasonable for sure.
Yeah, those cards are pretty insane. You open up two against tier, you're probably winning the game. That's just what
Hmm.
it is.
Yep.
Um, any final thoughts on the deck so far?
I think the deck definitely has a lot of potential. It's one of the, I think, very many sleeper decks of the format. Definitely give it a shot if you are a fan of just Tri-Brigade in general, or if you like missed this deck and you want to tinker around with it after the most recent ban list. I think for sure it'll keep seeing some experimentation, and in a later format where tier maybe gets hit more in like a post-photon hypernova world, for example, we could see this deck rise up once again. So definitely cool to just keep in the back of your mind, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Tier is just one of the decks right now that is so dominant. And then try just always being able to be the dark horse in the format. Like, I'm sure we'll see it again. And especially just having three Tenki. It's really interesting seeing three Tenki. And, like, the fact that we still have,
Yeah,
like, one Rhoda. It's like, something's got to be cooking, you know? Like, I'm
yeah, it's
excited to
crazy.
see. Because there's no way that we have three Tenki back. There's got to be there for
Yeah.
something.
Oh,
So,
and fun fact, when we had like the Samori link and like the Lyrilusc support came out initially in Synchro Storm, we actually didn't have three Tenki back then. We only had one. So this is the first time we actually get to play this version of the deck with like three Tenki, like the full tri package and everything. So it's really, really cool.
yeah, I'm sure we'll see a lot of play here and there just with people messing around with it and seeing what they can do. And maybe we'll see it be competitive again.
Yeah,
Who knows?
for sure.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a great video just talking a lot about Tri Brigade and really what it can do in the format.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always do enjoy this deck. It's something that even after the initial hits, I was still trying to mess around with it, and it's something that is always gonna be one of my favorites. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate you having the time to be able to just chat here. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And again, I'll be linking Sir Emanon's channel down in the description below, so definitely go ahead and check that out. If you haven't already joined the Discord, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and if you want a coaching session over Medify, that's all down in the description below. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, definitely subscribe. Once we hit 16,000, again, we're giving away that Player's Choice Spellground, so definitely excited to be able to do that for you. And without further ado, I hope that everyone has a wonderful night. Thank you.